Hey, what's going on, guys? Zedd here, bringing you another Soul Calibur 6 video. And it is that time of the year, or month rather, again, where we're doing our updated tier list. So I try to do these once a month near the end of the month. Um, some stuff will change, some won't, and we'll just kind of go from there. But first, I don't want to see comments saying your list is bad because I don't like it. I don't want to see comments being like, well, this person does really well in tournament with this character, therefore you're wrong. No. There's so many smaller aspects that go into these lists that I won't even be able to talk about all of them. Otherwise, the video would be 3 times as long. People have complained that the videos are too long, which, I mean, sorry for giving detail, but I'll try to get through characters that I've already maybe talked about in depth before and just kind of go from there. So I'll try to speed it along. Lastly, this will also kind of be, well, as little matchup bias as possible, but that's really difficult, as always. But I'm going to make some changes in terms of how I place characters. So there's going to be an emphasis on things like tournament viability, set play, how they maybe not maybe abuse isn't the right word, but how they can abuse and use meter mechanics in order to gain leverage over the opponent. So things like that will be at play a little more in this list than my past list, and we'll just kind of go from there. So, anywho, without further ado, um, let's just get started. Okay, so essentially what the tiers mean are A plus is just really good characters with really good matchups. You can kind of pick them and like into anyone and not feel so bad. They might have like 1-4-6 matchup or maybe one, 3.5, 6.5, or 3-7, however you want to talk about it. But that's kind of the extent, right? So that's going to be A plus tier. And the couple of characters that I'm going to confidently put in A plus as of right now are going to be in no particular order. I'll try to order it after at the end. But Zas, Raph, pardon me, Amy, and mm, yeah, so we'll just start with those three. So Raph essentially, I talked about this quite a lot in my last tier list video, but Raph essentially has, as of season 2, counterplay to the counterplay. Now we don't see this character a lot, and part of the reason why is, well, first and foremost, people just play who they like. They there's no one character beats all anymore. So a lot of people just play who they like. Raph is a bit of a higher execution character in terms of execution, or within Soul Calibur standards of execution. He also does require a lot of mental games and mind games. You can't just play Raphael in a very simple fashion. You sort of have to. He's an all or nothing kind of character. Either you commit to learning how he works and how his offense and defense work and the input execution, or you're just not that good with him. Like, it's very much a black and white situation. So he's just a lot to commit to, especially in a competitive environment. So that's why we don't see him much. But he is a very strong character. He has a ton of really good matchups, very few poor ones, and his pressure is there and his mix-ups are there. Now, the interesting thing about his risk-reward ratio is that and his mix-ups is that they aren't that bad either way of this, like either way you go. So if you go for the low, he gets a good Oki situation. If you go for the pressure, or if you go for the mid or high, he gets further pressure or further frame advantage, etc., etc. Or in the case of his preparation stance, he can set up things like Shadow Evade, uh, AG and QP, or whichever the parry instance is called. It's slipping my mind at the moment, but he just has ways to keep pressure on you. But then he has the defensive punishment tools with his 4-6 ABK lethal hits, as well as a ton of range on his punishment. So he kind of plays every aspect of Caliber well, but you have to be really good with the character in order to play those aspects really well. So that is why I have him up here, and I think he's very strong. Not only does he take advantage of good pressure and good players, but he also plays fundamental caliber really well. And like I said at the beginning, we are going to talk about meter mechanics a little more because I think it's really important now in the current metagame. His soul charge is okay, and his CE is okay. His soul attack, don't really see it that often, but his CE is just a great punishment tool, and his soul charge just gives him that extra break attack, or not break attack, pardon me, guard damage that he kind of lacks. That's kind of the one thing with his offense is your guard's not going to get shattered right away, right? So that's why I have Raph up here. So Zas, again, this isn't in any particular order. Zas is kind of the jack of all, master of none. Now, what I mean by that, because like you could say that about Geralt too, but what I mean by that is he has all the strengths you want from a character, but none that are just glaringly ridiculous that you can't handle. But then there's nothing else you can really exploit from him either, if that makes sense. So, you look at a character like, say, I don't know, Yoshi, right? Yoshi's offense is pretty good, right? His Yoshi's offense is pretty good, but his defense and his range is where he kind of lacks. But Zas kind of just does a little bit of everything. You have short range, you have long range, you have horizontals, you have verticals, you have great meter mechanics like soul charge, critical edge, and soul attack. They're all pretty good. And then his reversal edge is very unique, which is, I forgot to mention that with Raph as well. He has the reversal edge cancel, as well as a really long duration one. So there's that as well. Zas kind of has the full meal deal. The only thing he arguably lacks is lows, but even then, they're still useful and they work. But what Zas is a real strength, jack of all, but the one thing he is the master of is reverse ring outs and map pressure. So what I mean by map pressure in a game like Soul Calibur is positioning on the screen, right? Where he is in control. So if his back is to the wall or ring edge, generally against most characters, that's an advantageous situation for you. But in the case of Zess, it's actually the opposite. If his back is to the ring edge or wall, that's a bad situation for you, or rather a potentially bad situation for you. And yet, even when your back is to the wall and ring edge, it's still a bad situation for you because he does have some decent wall splat and ring out buttons, primarily 4-6B, which is a tracking vertical. Rather, it tracks more often than not. And what it does on, I believe it's just counter hit, it might also be regular hit, don't quote me, is that it just kind of launches you out of the ring from a decent way away from it too. So Zas just kind of has the full package. He's a little slow in terms of he feels a little sluggish in the neutral game, but that's not really a bad thing. The only thing with Zas that you can quote unquote exploit is the fact that when he pulls you in, it's generally at minus frames, at least if we're talking on block. So you kind of have to make the read and call him out if you want to challenge him, or else he's going to keep taking his turn. And of course, if he has meter, then when you go to swing, he might CE, so on, so on. And so he's not free, and we don't see a lot of Zas at all. And again, part of the reason why is players just play who they like in Soul Calibur. But Zas does have the full meal deal, and you can't really go wrong with the character. His biggest weaknesses, arguably, would be his, like I said already, lows, sluggishness, but also his damage without curses is kind of meh. It is what it is. And his Oki game is, it's okay. It's nothing to write home about, but it's not that bad either. So Zas is a really good character. Doesn't have a lot of bad matchups, if any. Well, I'm sure he does, but not that many. And it always feels very oppressive just playing against him, period. Like if he has a bar meter, you kind of just have to respect him at all times. Moving on to Amy. Amy is very annoying. She, much like, it has a lot of similarities of, say, Raph and Xianghua kind of put together, kind of a blend of both. But what she has going for her is the amount of damage and pressure she can generate with her Red Rose preparation. Now, if we're talking Amy without roses, I still think she's a decent character, but it would be somewhere like A-. But with how much easier it is to get roses now since her Season 2 moves, as well as her different combo routes and all that, she is able to somewhat consistently get red rose in a somewhat of a timely fashion. Now, unlike the two ahead of her, she does have some frustrating matchups, but at the same time, she is incredibly strong in some matchups, whereas Raph and Zas, they're a little more closer to the 5-5 scale of things, right? So Amy's a little more polarizing with her matchups, but still very strong. Things like if she happens to be purple rosed, then she gets resist impacts on her parries. Things like her damage output in general from red is just crazy high, and then if she really wants to annoy you, she can just keep using her 4AA while in red. It's very good frames, very, very fast tech crouch, horizontal low. That does, I believe it is 24 or 30 damage, somewhere in that ballpark of 25-ish. That's very annoying. It's very hard to deal with. And you just kind of have to block it or call out the block if you care enough to block it. And if not, then you're going to be eating that a lot. Past that, like I already said, her damage is crazy, but her combos set up some really good situations for her. There are some where you can just roll away from, but you do still sometimes risk eating the 4BB in red, which is quite annoying. But in general, her Oki is quite strong, her mix-up game is quite good, and her pressure is there. Where she lacks, arguably, very much arguably, is in her neutral game. Now, what I mean by that is it's not necessarily free as Amy just to keep using her safe launchers, just like it isn't that free with Xianghua. The difference between the two, or one of the differences between the two versions of the safe launchers, is that Amy's has tech duck and tech jump frames depending on which one she uses and when she uses it, and that's kind of that. But her horizontal presence in neutral is very much not there, and so her neutral game kind of lacks, but everything else she's very much a beast in, and when she pops red rose, she just is kind of the best when it comes to pressure. Now, in terms of her meter stuff, I think Amy's meter usage is okay. Now, her soul attack like I already said, can set up some really advantageous situations for her. Her soul attack is very good, but I think that her CE, as it does rely on the roses to become anything substantial, and the range of it is awful, and then her soul charge is kind of whatever. So her soul attack is super good, and then her CE and soul charge are okay. But let's be honest, I don't really think Amy needs super powerful meter management, or meter use rather, as she already has a very powerful kit in itself. Oh, and her lethal hits are just as accessible as the other two characters, so she has no issues netting damage when she needs it. So next up in this tier, I will put, or rather next up on the list, I guess, let's do... I still might move people around as we go, but let's do Siegfried goes there. Mina, Geralt, Sophitia, oh, there. So yeah, we'll talk about Azwel. Cassandra, Cervantes. Oops. Yeah, so we'll leave that for now. So let's talk about Azwel real quick before we move on to A tier. So Azwel is kind of he hasn't changed. Like, let's just call it what it is. He hasn't really changed since season 2 happened. Now, of course, season 1 to season 2 Azwel has changed, but season 2 to now, not really changed. Still a strong character, great buttons. His frame data is pretty solid. He has really good setups. His Oki is there, at least in Axe, and his punishment is okay. Realistically, though, with Azwel, kind of the reason why you don't see a lot of successful Azwels anymore is because they took away the crutch aspects of his kit and the quote-unquote brain deadness of his kit, and they made him a little more well-rounded while not being so overtuned in the Axe stance. So with Azwel, he's actually quite difficult to play optimally at high level. And the reason why is if you're stuck in a situation where you don't have access to the tool that you need, you're kind of hooped. So for example, if you're stuck in Axe and you need a punish, or you need to get out of pressure from a character like, say, Amy or Talim, whatever, it's really difficult. So you really have to manage what parts of your kit you have access to, when you have access to them, and things like that. It makes the character very involved as both a player and an opponent. Um, and that's what makes him very strong, is he has the ability to flex different parts of his kit at different times, but it's also his biggest weakness. With that said, though, the parts of his kit he does have access to are arguably the best in slot of those buttons. So for what I mean by that is, if we're in sword, right? What do you get in sword? You get horizontals, um, a faster frame data, and generally speed and some pretty good lethal hit opportunities. But he gets an I-10, and it's the farthest reaching I-10, I think, in the game. I know it's the farthest reaching horizontal I-10. So there's that. His 2A has hella range. His punishment game in sword is quite good because of AB and 2-2B, and then also 2BB. And then he has a decent post GI game as well in sword. And so there's that. But then what he doesn't have is a horror mid. He doesn't have a low. He doesn't have. Well, I guess his horror mid is 8A now that I think about it. But he doesn't have a low. And generally speaking, there's not a ton of damage that can come from that stance if we're not getting counter hit or we're not getting lethal hit, right? And then you look at Axe, right? You don't have very good punishment, but you have super good Oki, very good neutral, horror mid, great launchers, safe launchers at that, and general mix-ups. And then shield, of course, you have your defensive things like auto GIs, very, very fast launcher from full crouch, very quick low from full crouch, and general huge buttons that kind of control space. So it all depends on what the Azwel needs and what the situation and matchup calls for. And that's kind of what makes him so strong, is he can flex different things at different times. And then of course you have his soul charge, which gives him access to all of it at once. Now, like I already said, he kind of has the best in-slot versions of these different tools. So if you have access to them all at the same time, well then, you're golden. So that's kind of the Cole's notes of Azwel. Like I said, he hasn't changed much, so I don't want to spend too long on him, but he's a very, very powerful character. So A tier. A tier basically represents characters that are still very, very strong, but maybe not as well rounded as the ones above, or maybe they have some really glaring matchups, or maybe one or two that kind of hold them back, or maybe they're just not quite as strong as the characters above them as well, but they're still super, super good, and you cannot go wrong picking these characters. So first up, we have Siegfried. Siegfried, again, hasn't changed a whole lot since the most recent patch, but generally speaking, he's still a pretty strong character. And the idea with Siegfried is you generally want to keep them at the mid-range, keep them out with I call them slap attacks, but you have your A slide B, you have your AGA, 3A4, 2-2A, all like mids, horizontals, and then the AGA is a high, of course. And then there's that. Plus, you have the Dark Legacy. He isn't as crazy as he used to be, mostly because of the fact that you can pardon me, you can now resist impact the bubble, and if you practice that enough, it is doable on reaction / anticipation, because if you're anticipating the bubble, if it's or anything, it's a lot easier to react such to something as opposed to just a raw reaction, right? Granted, trickier to do online than offline, but absolutely doable. So anytime the opponent has half a bar meter, the Siegfried has to be careful of doing that. So it's more than likely that the Siegfried now, in terms of the metagame, is going to sit on that Dark Legacy and try to take advantage of the damage, right, from the lethal hits, and maybe even use full crouch 3K, I believe the input is, which is a very, very high damaging, fast, while-rising kick that does expel Dark Legacy for, I believe it's 70 damage, but I could be wrong, give or take a little bit. Generally, though, again, he controls space really well. When you're in his face, he kind of has to make the read with a base hold. It's very hard for him to get out of heavy pressure, and against characters with good frame data, he can have a bit of a rough time. But again, you just want to control that neutral with Siegfried and just kind of run the game. Very strong character. His stance game is kind of whatever. If you have enough experience against Siegfried, you can kind of anticipate what's coming, but also he doesn't really have access to any form of mix-up other than one particular stance. I believe it's reverse side hold, where he has either the low or the mid, but the risk-reward ratios there are not quite balanced, so you can generally decide which one you want to block and go from there. So Siegfried, super solid character, just has a couple really depressing matchups, but also a couple matchups where he's very powerful. Now Mina generally, a lot of people might say A plus tier. I disagree. The reason why is I don't think Mina has the tools to deal with heavy pressure up close. Sure, she has auto GIs, but aside from that, she doesn't really have much. Her range buttons on block are actually punishable by some characters, depending on range. And she also has a bit of a rough time against some of these other characters in A plus and A tier. So if you're seeing these characters a lot and they're strong in the current metagame, then automatically your character is going to fall down because they're losing to the characters that are powerful, right? It's just kind of the way it works. So she is a very oppressive character, though. Her Oki is super good. Her combos are crazy. Like, Mina is still Mina at the end of the day. The only thing is that she just doesn't quite have the same ring out potential as she did in season 1. It's still good, but it's not quite the same. And also, her up close buttons are kind of whatever. Her soul attack's a bit of a joke. Her soul charge is the same thing. You kind of only have to watch out for 3 buttons, and you can just kind of run away for 10 seconds. And then her CE is kind of whatever. It's more used as either a whiff punish or a combo extension tool anyway. So she doesn't really abuse the meter as well as some of the other characters in the game, which I did forget to talk about with Siegfried. Siegfried's soul attack does have a niche use. It's pretty powerful. It can set up decent situations at the wall or ring edge. His soul charge is okay, but his CE is where his power is. It's safe, it's very strong, good whiff punish, and gives him Dark Legacy stacks, right? But back to Mina. In general, I think that she is very, very, very oppressive against some characters. But I also think that some characters are very oppressive against her. And it's kind of this interesting balance where in some matchups, I think Cassandra is a great example, or Sophitia, right? Mina wants to keep them out, but as soon as that character gets in your face, the Mina's kind of screwed. And even Sophitia, with as powerful as she is right now, we'll get to her in a bit, but even Sophie can punish her Mina's 2-2B on block, and she can actually completely delete the full crouch 1KK mix-up altogether, at least on block. So Mina is not impervious to being defeated, she is not an impenetrable wall, and so she is not unbeatable, and she is not well-rounded like the A plus tier. And that's kind of the gist of where I'm going with this. The reason why you're not A plus tier is because you don't have the full meal deal, right? And that's what keeps Mina in A tier, in my opinion. Anyway, still a strong character, totally, and she's very simple to play, at least in terms of execution. But what makes her tricky and not as competitively seen, not that she's not viable, don't get me wrong, is just the fact that it's all about the footsies, it's all about the spacing, and you really have to be careful because her frame data can change on a whim, right? Depending if it's tipper hit or not. And so it's a lot of effort into the neutral game to play Mina really effectively. It's why there are so few that do so well in tournament. Anyway, moving on, Geralt. Geralt is kind of the, I don't really know how to word it, but Groh is probably one of the only characters in the game right now that just slows the game right down. And part of that is because of how prevalent soul charge and soul attacks are now because of season 2. And when you're playing against Groh, you don't really want to soul charge or soul attack because of his silver sword damage. So as soon as you whiff, you're about to get screwed by a silver sword lethal hit, right? He also isn't as basic as he once was. He now has lethal hits attached to his signs, and so that adds a little more offensive explosiveness, if you will, that he previously lacked. He has some of the best in-slot buttons, just like Azwel, except not as many. Like his horizontal mids, super strong. His mid-range buttons are super good. His pokes push you so far back that against a lot of the closer range characters, they can't even challenge after blocking things like Geralt's AA or BP. Very strong. Geralt's lows are kind of whatever, but they get the job done, and his grab range is pretty incredible. I swear he grabs thin air. It's crazy. But there's not much to say about Groh. He hasn't changed a whole lot. I think he's better than people make him out to be, and part of the reason why is I'm a firm believer in fundamentals take you so far in a game like Soul Calibur, because if your jank and cheese isn't working, or the thing that you're capable that you're used to abusing isn't working, then you're left with fundamentals. And characters who have good fundamentals tools are inevitably going to be good in tournaments. Plus, if we're talking about Geralt in particular, there's a very low execution barrier. It's very simple, like this tool for this job and that's it kind of thing. Or on the flip side, one tool that just does everything and you can kind of roll with it. So you don't have to think too hard when you're playing him. And so from a tournament perspective, it makes things a lot easier to just chill out, veg out, and kind of just play your game. And Linkor is a great example of that. You know, he's gone on the record saying that part of the reason he plays Geralt in the first place is that his nerves really get to him, and Geralt is a great character to just play your game and just chill, right? Just vibe. So Geralt's pretty strong. I probably put him higher than most people will, but I think that fundamentals go so far in a game like Soul Calibur. Regarding his Soul Charge CE and SA, though, I think that his CE is still the best use of his meter, but his Soul Attack, or rather his Soul Charge, it's okay. It's okay. His Soul Attack is a way to give him another sign, but I still think his CE is the way to go, personally. Sophie. Sophie is probably my top 3 hated characters in this game, and so it's so hard for me to put her here and not higher. But I hate this character so much. She is just very like if Geralt's the king of fundamentals, she's the queen of fundamentals, and it's so frustrating because she also has some of the best horror mids in the game and best in slot buttons in general. Her whiff punishment game is near unparalleled. Her movement speed is very high on both sideways and forwards, and her lethal hits are, while they are specific, they are very applicable, and they're attached to moves that are just good. And that's not that's not super common in this game. A lot of times you'll see that the lethal hit moves you only want to use for the lethal hit, but Sophie actually has some lethal hits that are just decent moves. I'm not saying they're necessarily good moves, but they're decent moves to just throw out anyway. So you can kind of just use them, and if you get lethal hit, awesome. If you don't, whatever. Her lows are so irritating, right? Full crouch 1K and 1K. They're so irritating, so strong. And her soul charge is ridiculous. So this is kind of first up on the list of soul charges that I want to talk about, and it's because of how brain dead her soul charge really is. Now, you're going to be like, but Zedd, why don't you just step her in soul charge? Well, you can't just step Sophie, because if you get counter hit by 1K, it's a knockdown, which is crazy. And she also has 3A, she has 6A, like she has all the tools in the world to prevent you from stepping up close. And so it opens up the game, or it opens up 2 through 6A plus B, or Angel Step B, or Angel Step A plus B, and that move is arguably spammable. It's plus on block situation that is just very oppressive, and the chip damage on it is unreal. You can combo into it, you can combo out of it. It's so useful. And then she gets a stab that has excessively long range. So if you're playing in the neutral, say against Mina, and Mina whiffs, say 6A, you can actually punish it. Whereas so many characters, you either have to be like lightning fast with Task B, or some characters can't even do anything about that. But she can in Soul Charge, and so that's 2 through 6 B plus K. Plus, then she gets RIs in Soul Charge because she needs it, obviously, Kappa. And she just, God, her Soul Charge is so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And her CE, while very short range, is a horizontal mid. It is something she can combo into. It does refill her guard gauge, I believe it is. And her soul attack is basically as ridiculous as her 2 through 6A plus B in soul charge. So her meter usage is inarguably top 3 in the game, arguably top 1 in the game. in terms of like a well-roundedness of meter and the fact that you can't go wrong with CE, SC, or SA. They're all super good. They're all abusable, and her buttons are super strong. She controls space super well, and fundamental game is there. Strangely enough, though, for such a neutrally speaking, easy to play character with safe launchers and good buttons and a great meter usage, she actually has some of the most frustrating and difficult combos to execute, which is really funny to think about. But I guess I would rather that than them be easy because I hate this character. I think she's pretty fucking brain dead and a very powerful character if you want to get better at Soul Calibur while playing a very strong character. The reason why she's not an A plus is that her frame data, like, she's not often plus unless she's in Soul Charge, but also the fact that some of her best buttons are -12 or -14. So she does have to take some risk as opposed to say Geralt, right, where he can use the same buttons. Granted, they're not as volatile, but they're not punishable. Right. So if he does have some risk for medium reward, but in general she's super annoying and super frustrating to deal with, and her matchup chart is quite good. Surprisingly, even though she's a sword shield character, so you'd think short range, she actually has a very good matchup chart. I think this character is really good. I'm still reluctant not to put her in A plus, but I would say that would be my bias. So she could be A plus, she could be A. I don't know. Um, we'll see. We'll see. But I think Sophie's super good. If I order when I order this tier list at the end, she'll probably be at the front of A tier, but we'll get to that. Cassandra. Cassandra is a character that honestly I don't know. I still think this character is kind of whatever. She just does things. But you can hold it, right? But the argument is, but Zedd, she has pretty good guard damage. Her frames are super good. She has command throws. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's all true, but like you can hold that. But then I think about the fact that there are characters out there who really have no way of stopping her pressure, and then I think about how difficult that could be to deal with. So I moved her up on my list. So this is one of those characters that I think that the matchup as a Xianghua player was kind of speaking more than the truth. So for now, I'm putting her up into A tier. Cassandra is basically Oppression Session. She's the anime character of Soul Calibur, and what I mean by that is both her flashiness, but also the amount of APM and her frame data is very reminiscent of just go, go, go. Her punishment game with Divine Force is very good. Her damage with Divine Force is crazy good. Without Divine Force, though, her damage is kind of whatever. Her Soul Charge is very frustrating to deal with. Similar reasons as Sophitia, but or rather, if you took Geralt's Soul Charge and Sophie's Soul Charge, and you kind of get a little bit of both, you have Cassandra's Soul Charge. So it's a very good Soul Charge to use. The Soul Attack as well, pretty solid, and her CE without Divine Force gives you Divine Force, and with Divine Force does a ton of damage. So you have that multi-purpose use regardless of how you look at it. And so overall, she's a very aggressive offensive character. Where she lacks, though, is in order for her to really keep the oppression session going, she has to fully commit to verticals. Her horizontal game is kind of whatever, with the exception of 3A on counter hit. So if you as a defender are willing to take the risk and step, you'll more than likely be able to get out of her pressure just fine. But that is a risk the defender has to take, else I was gonna say Soul Calibur, else Cassandra just gets to play her game. So I don't know. There's not much to say. She hasn't changed much, honestly, since her release, other than the fact that she now has an I-10 AA, which is something that I think a lot of people forget, and it's very good. It makes her frame game more real as opposed to it being I-12, and so yeah, she's a pretty aggressive Unga character, and if you just like to go ham and look good while you do it, Cassandra's a character for you. So I think she is probably the best rushdown, quote unquote, rushdown character in the game uh, by a pretty good margin. She's up there with Amy for sure, but she can go more ham than Amy can. It doesn't require the roses to do so. And then Cervantes. So Cervantes is very similar to Sophie and Groh, so I won't really go on too much about it. But his whiff punishment is great. His horror mids are great. His neutral buttons are great. His damage is crazy good. His just control of the screen is very good as well. Now, like Sophie, he has a very, very simple to use, somewhat abusable soul charge in that he can just keep on using A6B, and then he now has 236B, which is a different form of the dread charge, and that's a really good button as well. A6B not only does chip damage, but it shoves you way the heck away. It starts with A6, which is already a super good button, and it really doesn't use up as much of the soul gauge as you might think it does, so it's a very good button. His soul charge is pretty good. His soul attack can be used, but it's more the soul charge that you're looking for. And his critical edge, of course, does a ton of damage. It's very fast, and he can combo into it rather easily. He also has just like he has so many ways to convert into damage. Granted, he is somewhat punishable when he goes for those moves, but he can also just play really safe, and that's the thing, right? Cervantes literally can play either, medium risk, high reward, or he can play low risk, medium reward, and he can kind of just flex it based on the player and the matchup. And he's a very adaptive, flexible character is kind of the best way to describe it. With similar neutral and soul charge tools as Geralt and Sophie, kind of blend of both. His execution levels are a bit on the higher end of the spectrum, alongside Sophie and characters like Taki, but still manageable. Fantastic character. Definitely his previous iteration was a shadow of what he is today, and you can't really go wrong with this character, but do know that you are kind of committing to a somewhat of an advanced character to play. Also, underrated is his movement. His backstep is insanely strong. If you can learn how to backstep cancel, and this is only something that I learned recently about this character, is that you can actually walk out of things that most any other character cannot walk out of in terms of setups, which is crazy. So his movement is hella good as well. Cervantes, very strong character. Again, he'll be on the higher end of the A tier once we get into the organization. Super good character, can't go wrong. And then most likely moving on to A minus tier, but I might end up moving characters around. First up, for sure. Oh, sorry, one more. Ivy as well. I think Ivy is still a really good character. I see her kind of falling down some people's tier lists, but I don't really agree. I think she's just really strong. She has really good lethal hits. She controls a lot of the screen, right? Her soul attack can set up some pretty ridiculous situations. Granted, they have changed it a little bit. Of course, her throws are still her throws. CS is breakable, Kappa, and then Summon Suffering is not breakable, and so you can kind of loop these throws and make her Oki game very, very frustrating to deal with. She has a defensive parry CE, and then Christmas Tree is Christmas Tree, and honestly, she could be an A tier just for that. But for those who don't know, it's her While Rising B plus K attack. If spaced properly, it is not punishable by most characters in the game, and if it is, all they're going to get is like 12 damage, and it's really awful. And it's only I believe it's minus 14 to 18 depending on the range, or rather minus 16 to 18 depending on the range. But so many 16 frame moves can't reach her, and it's really irritating, and it auto GIs everything, but it's not an RI, like, thank God. Uh, but yeah, very frustrating character to deal with, very strong in the right hands, and yeah, I don't know, Ivy's still Ivy. She's been pretty strong since the beginning, and she hasn't changed much since then. So yeah, I forgot about Ivy. She goes there. Anyway, moving on to A minus. I got Rugi, got 2B, got Nightmare, Yoshi, where's she at? Xianghua, and then yeah. So A minus tier. A minus tier, as you can see, based on the fact we have 5 tiers, is basically middle of the pack. These characters all have weaknesses that are not exploitable to a degree, but you can take advantage of them, and they have strengths which are very, very strong. as well, but they're not game breaking or they're not so crazy that you can just kind of crutch on it. These characters maybe have more diverse matchup charts than everyone in the A plus and A tiers, and overall these characters have been solid throughout most of the life of Soul Calibur, or good, or like in some fashion they've been mid to high tier. So if you main these characters, you're probably in a pretty good spot for the most part. Um, yeah. So moving on, Mitsurugi, or starting with Mitsurugi. Rugi was kind of in that top 5, top 8 conversation for a while. However, part of that was because, frankly, I think I speak for many players when I say part of that was because we didn't really see him much. And when we did, it was with Skill, who's a very strong player and showcased a lot of what Rugi can do. And in general, Europe does showcase this character quite well. And I think that we overestimated the character, but then also when he got his I-12 CE reduced to I-14, that really kind of shed the light on where his strengths lied. So now that his CE is 14, it's still one of the fastest in the game, but not I-12. Now that his CE has been reduced, and now that he has kind of been explored a little bit more by the community, he's not quite the craziness that he once was. Still a really strong character though. Like this man hits like a truck. And his whiff punishment game, oh forget it, you're dead. Like, but his frame data is not that great. Sure Blade, while it is very strong, while he has it, the conditions to get it are kind of iffy. He has to CE or cancel a soul charge or what's the other one? I think it's, yeah, hit a projectile when he's in stance, so that just doesn't happen against most of the cast in general. Um, in general, too, Rugi, like I said already, he's punishable, but he's also a little sluggish. Now, what I mean by that is there are some key fast buttons that you can kind of just play around, and everything else you can kind of react to. His mix-up game, though, is there. So the thing with Rugi is, while his lows are super punishable, like super punishable, they hit very hard. So that's kind of the trade-off, right? Is the Rugi can take a risk and go for some really good damage, but he's not going to be in a good situation majority of the time, or it's going to be very, very easy to punish. And in the case of 1KB, you can even punish it on hit, right? So I would say that Rugi kind of has to play a more tempo-based game. Now, what I mean by that is you can press the attack if you're landing good counter hits and good setups and good Oki situations. But when Rugi is put on the back foot, you just have to kind of respect the fact that you're on the back foot. You can't just be mashing out with Rugi. You can't be mashing against Rugi. And you kind of just have to play a very yin and yang kind of caliber is the best way to put it. Now, that may not make sense to people, but it's more like a me thing. I feel like when I play against Rugi, it's my turn, then it's his turn, and then it's my turn, then it's his turn, then it's my turn. Like you very much trade turns with this character, kind of like Groh in that sense, in that his turns don't last more than a button, and you just kind of have to play caliber that way. So in general, I think, yeah, I will, Zakil. In general, I think that Ruki's just a good character, and yeah, you can't really go wrong picking this character, but just know that he's not quite the Titan that he once was, realistically. His Soul Charge is, or his CE is good, as we've already talked about, and his Soul Charge state, it doesn't really give him what he didn't already have. However, it does give him, it's more like an install in what it should be, in that it takes what was already good and makes it even better. So all of a sudden, 1KBB isn't punishable on hit. Instead, it leads to a crazy situation, and his 3B already has the lethal hit associated with it, so you don't want to really crouch block against this character at all. But if he soul charges, you kind of have to. And that's the issue, right? That's the issue. And his combo damage gets pretty crazy in Soul Charge, and if he happens to launch you away with like a setup or a combo, he can then proceed to cancel his Soul Charge into Shura Blade, and now you have to deal with that. And Shura Blade in general, while the tools are good, some are punishable, some are useless, but overall it's a pretty nice thing to have, and yeah, still a good character. 2B. 2B, I think, is probably the most argued about character in the entire community in terms of her tier list placement. And I like, seriously, There were times where people said top 3, bottom 3, dead even, top 10, bottom 5, season 2, bottom 5. Like, it, no one can agree on this character, and I've always put her kind of like A or A minus based on this list. I always think that she's better than people gave her credit for, but I don't think she's as good as people give her credit for in some regards. I'll explain briefly, because I've already talked about this in basically every tier list video I've ever done about 2B. But TLDR, I think that her neutral is ass. I don't think this character has any capabilities of playing the neutral game at all. I think her frames are shit. They are useless. She is so punishable. Like every single button you ever want to push in neutral is punishable. Um, where she thrives, though, is running the AGS game. Very high risk, medium reward character. And in general, she just puts you in a bunch of 50-50s. And her soul charge does exactly that. Just keep cycling 50-50s. You have to keep making guesses. Yes, reversal edge beats a lot of what her game plan rolls around, but she does have counterplay to that as well. So you do have to make somewhat of a guess. The recent changes to, or rather last patch, they kind of toned down some of her AGS strength while without buffing anything else. Personally, where I want to see them take this character is I want to see AGS toned down, or rather the soul charge toned down, but make her neutral better. Like fix this chick's frame data because I'm tired of getting free I-12 CEs against every single button she presses. It's freaking ridiculous. So I think this character needs to be played like you just have to commit. Like you got to take risks, you got to make reads. You cannot play this character in a safe way, or why are you playing the character at all, kind of thing. I think she's pretty good. Um, her soul attack is actually quite weird. If she combos into it in some cases, it sets up another combo or another Oki situation. It's a very unique, powerful soul attack, and her CE is quite good as well. She can use it from aerial leap, which is unique. Of course, duh, no one else goes in the air like she does. And then her soul charge state, like I already said, it just she starts mixing you up from HES. That's 2B. Moving on to Nightmare. Nightmare, you know what? He is kind of weird. I was talking to a couple different Nightmare players over the last while since season 2 came out. And I'm like, okay, so Nightmare hasn't really changed, and overall he's been nerfed. Why are we moving him higher on the tier list? And they're like, he's just kind of a different character. And I'm like, okay, sure. Sure. Um, so in general, I think that he can control space very well. Much like 2B, he kind of has to take a risk to do so, though. So, or pardon me, doesn't control space very well like 2B. Like 2B, he has to take risks to control space. Pardon me. Um, what I mean by that is you can step duck against Nightmare a lot, and the only way he can quickly combat that is 3A. But of course, 3A is a huge risk. 3A by itself is punishable. 3AA is hella punishable, and 3AB is giable, steppable, and punishable in some cases. So, yeah, Nightmare has to take a risk to stop you from step ducking. Other than that, he does a lot of guard damage. He hits like a truck, and when Nightmare doesn't have Night Terror charge, he's kind of whatever, right? Honestly, he's kind of whatever. But as soon as he's glowing pink and red, you really gotta respect the situations that you might get put into. You don't want to make a mistake, otherwise you're gonna get deleted. And when he's in Soul Charge, you really don't want to fuck up, because for that 10 seconds, he is just a menace. Like, he's very difficult to stop when he's in Soul Charge, and you just have to kind of take it. His CE, while it doesn't see as much use as you might think, in some matchups, it is ridiculous. And this is a character who probably has some of the most polarizing matchups in the game. Either they are free for him or he is free to them, kind of thing. And his CE is one of those tools that you kind of just have to go, oh, I guess I don't get to play the game now. Okay, bye. And, go from there. So, Nightmare's a solid character, tricky to play well. And what I mean by that is there is some execution there, but there's also just the risk reward ratios to factor in. There's a lack of an I-12 to factor in, and an unconventional CE, and so on, so on. So pretty solid character, can be oppressive. He's very much a character who it's never his turn, but he has to take it back, and if he does, it's probably a counter hit or lethal hit. And so when he swings, he's always hitting hard for the most part. Moving on to Yoshi. I hate this character. He's up there with Sophie for my top 3 hated characters. I hate this character. What I hate so much about Yoshi is I always feel like I'm in a mix-up situation. Always. And it's because of the fucking Hell Sweep. It's the fact that it has no animation by the time it starts. And it's ridiculous, and it actually hurts, and it sets him up for an Oki situation too, and it's just crazy. Other than that, his neutral is a lot better in season 2 than it was in season 1. He got his new moves. He's one of the characters who the new moves actually gave him a lot of freedom to kind of break through his weaknesses and develop more in some of his matchups. He could still use some tweaks, I think, and some matchups again are very awful for him. His movement is very good, and his mix-ups are there. But I would love to see this character's critical edge get reworked or changed in some way to make it more applicable. In general, I think his soul charge is kind of whatever, and his soul attack has like one particular use, and it's that you can combo into it in some cases, and it does set up somewhat of a mix-up situation. But overall, because of the fact this character has gimmicks regarding meter, right? I would like to see his meter gain get improvements. To be completely honest, I think Yoshi's meter usage is kind of bleh, right? So I think that would be really cool, considering it's kind of his gimmick. And now, what makes him in A- as opposed to B, right? All that said, is again his movement is good and his neutral is better, but still kind of lacking. But it's the fact that he forces you to use your meter. Now, if you're sitting at 2 bars for a while, it's usually recommended to use your meter anyway. However, like Grøh, kinda, he forces this meta game or this meter meta game on you. Like, oh, you want to stay at 2 bars? Oh, you really shouldn't do that. Or like, in general, you can't really play the same game when you're playing against Yoshi. Like, oh man, you better Yomi block this low real quick, otherwise I'm gonna delete you, right? So he forces you to take risks. He forces you to break out of your comfort zone. He's a very unconventional character to deal with while you're learning him, and some characters have a really hard time stopping his pressure, especially if we're talking med stance and dragonfly stuff. So in general, I think the character has the tools, but he is a character that is a very delicate balance. Either he's, somewhere around here or he's way back here, right? Like he's not I'm not confident that he would ever reach A tier unless they really gave him some stuff. And then in A- tier, I have Xianghua. Now, I recently made a video. At the time of this, the video before this one was about, is Xianghua a bad tournament character? And my answer to that is yes, generally speaking. So to kind of sum up that video, if you haven't seen it, basically I talk about the fact that in a 1-2 setting, Xianghua's lack of reliable lethal hits, lack of threatening mix-ups, and threatening tools in general that you have to respect mean that she has to work very hard to get the win, and has to work very, very hard to condition the opponent in any meaningful way in a 1-2 or 1-3 series, which is what competition is. Now, I still don't think that the character is as bad as some people make her out to be. Let me explain. So many Xianghua players are using her in a way that she's an offensive mix-up character who's really safe, and she can just poke you out all the time, right? But I don't really play that way. I play her in more of a defensive fashion compared to other X's, and I take advantage of her auto GI lethal hits. I take advantage of her tech crouches and then her good frame data, but in a defensive way. Because, yeah, she has mix-ups, but if we're talking about the PXS mix-up on Oki, some characters can back-tech it entirely or back-roll it in some combos, but they're both minus 14, and the low is only 30 damage, whereas the mid is 57 if both hits connect. So it's staggering how different the two are, so you should always just, take the low and block the mid. And the PXS is only real in some combos Oki situations. So if a Xianghua is using PXS against you in neutral, then you should really be challenging that. And so right now, I like having watched and participated in competitive, I so many players are just taking the Xianghua pressure and they don't need to be. They don't need to be. 2A, 2K, like she literally cannot deal with 2K if she's in PXS. So but no one's doing it. So if players would figure out PXS a little better, you would see, like, even though she's not played much now, you would see even less Xianghuas than you already do, and her tournament presence would drop even further. And I feel like more Xianghuas are going to realize soon, much like how I have, that you kind of have to keep playing her the same as Season 1, which is more defensive and poke-based oriented. You cannot just all of a sudden crank it up and play this character like a mix-up character. It doesn't work. It's not worth it. Um, so that's kind of my thoughts on Xianghua. Now, I give that spiel because she's my main, and you can expect that in a video like this. But anyway, moving on to the character's general strengths and weaknesses. Super safe, right? Super safe, very hard to punish. Yeah, she has some decent mix-ups. Her Oki game is top 5 in the game. I think her Oki is super good and underrated, and I think that players don't really respect it as much as they should, but at the same time, players don't really understand it as well as they should. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of situations where you can back roll or back tech that people don't back roll or back tech. Now, her weaknesses are the fact that her lethal hit game is all reads. Every single lethal hit she has, it's a read or a situational counter-based play. What I mean by that is things like auto GIs or post GI situations. At the end of the day, it's all a read. Unless you're willy-nilly using strings against this character, which is just poor matchup understanding, um, they're all reads. So there are many, many times where I play full sets without getting a single lethal hit as Xianghua, or maybe if I do, again, a heavy read. I don't just have like a triggers on counter hit, or triggers on whiff throw, or I don't have easy access to lethal hits like that. So it's hard for her to net any serious damage other than her safe launchers. Now, her safe launchers, frankly, you really don't want to be getting hit by, and you shouldn't be getting hit by, because there's no reason to low block this character in general. She doesn't have a horror mid that's quick. 4-4A is there, but it's okay. It gets the job done. Her neutral game is very reliant on linear buttons. Her horizontal neutral tools just are kind of whatever for the most part. And overall, she's got somewhat of a reliance on high attacks. So if your character has a lot of tech crouches, that'll do you a lot of favors in the matchup. But the biggest weakness that she has, in my opinion, in the current season, like I love the character, everything about her. Her biggest weakness is how garbage her soul charge is. Because, like, sure, she has an I-12 CE, but so many characters have two of the three of either a good soul charge, state, soul attack, or CE. Xianghua only has a good CE. Her soul attack is kind of whatever, and her soul charge is garbage. It's straight garbage. And the situation she gets after shoving you away with soul charge is just really bad for Xianghua. So it's a catch-22. It's a catch-22. Hey, Jack. So in general, I would like to see some changes to her soul charge because it's a gimmick, it's bad, it's inconsistent, and yeah, I'd be happy with her at that point. Now, the reason why I think defensively is the best way to play this character is because of the fact her lethal hits are all read-based, and you don't really have time in a competitive environment to condition the opponent. Therefore, why would you? You kind of just have to play really good Soul Calibur and make strong reads, and then you'll see success. But you can't just play the character and win like some people think with the safe launchers. It's not that simple. So anyway, that's kind of it for Xianghua. I've talked about this character a hell of a lot, and I still will. And yeah, so that's it for Xianghua. Now, I want to say that's it for A minus tier. Here's the thing. So at this point in the list, we're over halfway done. I want to make it clear that every character in this game is competitively viable, in my opinion. But the matchup charts are going to start getting staggering as we go down the list, or some characters are just straight up outclassed. And some characters, one in particular, people just have a very skewed understanding of how they work, so maybe they overrate them, or maybe a lot of players just don't really know how to deal with them in general, right? So moving on to the B. Oh, right. And with that said, I do actually, the reason why it goes A plus, A minus, is I think that these three tiers, like how many characters do we have here? 7, 12, 16. These 15, 16 characters, because you could argue the placement of some, you cannot go wrong. Like all of these characters, I think you could play and you'll be fine. And I think Xianghua is maybe the only debatable one here, but I'll stand by it. Up playing OP. But from here on out, you're going to start running into some serious problems. So, in the B tier, and I think there's a big difference between A minus and B, sort of, or a noticeable difference, rather. We have Kilik, Groh, Maxi, Taki, Talim, Tira, and Hilde. Which, of course, leaves Voldo and Astaroth, and we'll talk about that. But Kilik is a character who I think just doesn't really do anything really well uniquely. It's actually something I've talked about a lot, and I think that this character just lacks an identity. Yes, he has his soul charge. However, his soul charge is not unique. He just uniquely changes forms and starts losing health. But and his CE changes, but it already has somewhat niche applications anyway. A lot of soul charges have good break damage, or a lot of soul charges have good damage in general, good pressure, good frames. Like there is a ton of soul charges like this in the game, so he's not special. His CE, yes, it's safe, which admittedly I didn't even know until like a couple weeks ago, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't do as much damage. It's kind of whatever. And again, there are so many CEs like it, and his soul attack is okay, but again, there are a bunch of soul attacks that do the same thing but better. And as a character, the only specific tools that come to mind that are worth playing Kilik for are Wall Rising B, I think the button is, and 2-2B. So 2-2B can lead to one of his lethal hits, so that's pretty good, and it's a pretty good move in general. It's a launcher, it's pretty solid. And Wall Rising B, where he tech crouches, tech steps backwards, and then pokes forward, that move is very powerful. It is so multi-purpose. Like that move alone carries the character. If they nerfed that move, the character would be awful. Like in my opinion. In my opinion. And I just think Kilik is just so vanilla. Like, I don't think he's bad, for the record. I don't think Kilik's bad. It's just that he's so vanilla. And, like, he doesn't do anything well, and he just kind of exists. His 4A is super annoying, but there's already lows like that in the game. And his full crouch B, or, sorry, wall rising B is, like, the only unique button this character has. I don't know. I think Kilik really just needs an identity, is the best way to put it. But he's a very boring character, and you can play him lame just like you can play most characters lame. You agree with this tier list more already? Compared to whom? But hi, hello, and welcome. Voldo's still too high, Kappa. Moving on to Grøh, very much in the same spectrum. Here's the thing though, Grøh is actually unique. He has Steed of the Night, or whatever it's called, Sodin, right? And then his soul charge is pretty cool. He gets a bunch of new moves, new options, teleporting. Like it's quite flashy. It's quite cool. But the problem is, outside of soul charge, like, this is Groh's issue. Outside of soul charge, he is so ho hum. Like Jesus, yeah. His approach game's really good. Um, but that's it. Like Grøh is so often -12 that it's never Groh's turn. And so many of his stance transitions can just be challenged by I-12s or I-10s, that really he just doesn't get a chance to use them. His soul charge, if you lab it and you practice, majority of it's reactable. He's just so ho-hum and like so basic. He's a simp. Groh is so basic, and it's like you're never gonna play against Groh and be like, man, it's broken. Like you can't say that about anything this character does. Truly. So yeah, that's that's my thoughts on Groh. I don't really have much to say. I don't have much to say about Groh. He's so ho hum. I don't know. He's whatever. Now Maxi. Oh boy, Maxi. This one is. I feel like I've been trying to say. I don't know. I always feel like I have to defend Maxi when I put him low on my list. So, Heaven's Guard is not enough to change the character. Now, previously, I think on my last list, I had him somewhere around here in the midsection of A. I don't remember exactly. But after further labbing, further practice, and discussion with Maxi mains, I still am not convinced that this character is very good. The frame changes he got really don't matter. His man mode is whatever. You rarely see it. You rarely see it ever. And even when he gets it, it makes his game plan a little telegraphed because the only moves you have to worry about are Bruce Lee kick and I'm the man, which is RI-able. So like, whatever. Heaven's Guard is whatever. Like, it's whatever. I don't know. It's not enough. You can still walk out of his setups. You can still OS some of his stuff. You can still challenge with like tech crouching attacks or auto GI attacks, or you can poke him out. Like there's so many. The counterplay to Maxi is 100% still here. The only difference is he's allowed to hit Heaven's Guard every so often and challenge you for challenging him. The problem with that is if you just kind of wait Maxi out, eventually he's going to bite and you can get a full launch punish against Heaven's Guard. I still think that players are overrating Heaven's Guard. Not Maxi. I think that people, like, I'm pretty sure people would agree that Maxi is kind of whatever without Heaven's Guard, but I think Heaven's Guard is being overrated. People are like, I can't reactively launch Heaven's Guard. And I'm like, well, why not? There's no reason you shouldn't be able to, but okay. And so yeah, I don't know. I don't think Maxi is that great. I never feel oppressed when I'm playing against Maxi, although admittedly that's because of how many hours I have against the character, so I'm lucky. But I promise you, this character is not. This character is not what people make him out to be. And I see you guys in the chat. I'll get to that. I just want to get through this, and then we can talk about it after. So moving on to Taki. I mean, what do you say about Taki? I think this character sucks. Like, the only way she can generate any real offense is either when she's in soul charge with bomb cancels, or like hitting you with possession attacks. But you can swat out the possession transitions, and yeah, when she's in soul charge, you have to kind of just roll with it. Speaking of which, I forgot with Maxi. I don't think his soul charge is that great, and I don't think that his soul attack is that great either. Like you're kind of just adding another layer to Maxi. It doesn't actually make him stronger. It kind of just adds more jank that you have to just deal with. But I don't think it makes him that much stronger. So anyway, Taki, you just don't really have to respect this character. She's super fast. Like she's very annoying. Don't get me wrong. I think this character is fucking annoying. Like I really don't like dealing with this character. But I don't think she's that good, right? You can 2A a lot of her stuff. You can challenge possession all the time. Her best button is 6/6A plus B, which is like, if that's your best button, then I'm sorry, but like, what? And yeah, this character needs help. This character needs help. Other than that, like her critical edge, I think her critical edge is super good. I think her critical edge is actually insane, and because of how unique it is, it's maybe underlooked, and it doesn't really, ironically, it doesn't really fit her kit as well as some people may think. So let me reiterate. I'll give you both sides of the story. Either A, people would be like, "Oh, it's a defensive CE. You use it to counter people's aggression," but I actually say the opposite. I say you can use it to take your turn back, which is what Taki kind of struggles with, or you can use it to phase through mid-range buttons that keep you out. For example, like if a Siegfried's using a lot of 3A4 or Amina's using a lot of 2-2B, Taki can just go CE, and now she's in there, and so on, so on. However, the problem with Taki CE is I think it just separates Taki from the opponent way too far. Like, I would love to see them end closer together because I think it's just a really unfortunate situation for Taki to deal with. So while her CE is almost really good, I think the post CE situation sucks for her, and I would love to see it changed personally. But what do I know? um, Her soul attack is whatever. Her soul charge is the only time she gets any real pressure, but you know what? You can just hold that all day. Like you can just hold that shit all day and react, or not react, but like break throws when she goes to grab you, and you're pretty much good to go because her lows are a fat joke. And yeah, I don't Taki just whatever. Taki is, I think, though, very delicate. If you overtune Taki, because it's like, well, she requires somewhat high execution. Well, if you overtune Taki, she could be a menace, right? But right now, I don't think she's as strong as I'd like her to be, for the amount of effort that goes into playing the character, and her damage sucks as well. I think Taki needs some help. I don't know how though. Like, I don't really have good feedback for the character, to be honest with you, because I think it's so delicate with her. Um, but that's my thoughts on Taki. Talim, again, I hate this character. Talim, Yoshi, and Sophie are my three most hated characters in this game. And for Talim, it is strictly because of how she forces you to play. You kind of have to just make a call out when it comes to her stancing in some cases. Like, will she either flip back or sides flip, or will she flip over you? You kind of just have to commit and roll with it. Granted, there's a bit more to the tech than that, and there is some metagame differences to consider, but we're not going to get into that in this video. The only time that Talim ever has actual good pressure, much like Taki, is in her soul charge. So I think that Talim's soul charge is not as good as it looks, as it's a lot of strings. There are a bunch of GI spots that a lot of players don't exploit. However, if she hits you with a soul charge attack, holy moly, like you're dead. You're done. Like this character hits like a truck in soul charge. It's crazy. It's crazy. Um, but other than that, her soul charge is whatever. Her CE, it's very unique and it actually fits her game plan very well. I actually very much like the design of it. But I hate it. Like that's the thing. I hate it. But I do think it functions very well for what the character wants to do. You can use it as either an approach tool, a read tool, um, probably not a punish tool, but you could use it as either of those things, and it's a very good transition. Um, Somewhat of a read. It's a good move. Her soul attack. Um, I know she can use it after some combos and get like decent Oki, but here's what I don't like about her soul attack. It's that she's just kind of stuck there, like forever, almost like Ivy, right? So if Ivy, the best comparison I can think of right now off the top of my head would be like Ivy 6-6B plus K. If I if Ivy goes to use 6-6B plus K, which I believe is the move where she runs up, sticks her sword down in the ground, and then it comes up 3 times. It's like if Ivy's using that and whiffed, you know? Like, I think Talim's soul attack should be more akin to like the Sophitia or the Cassandra soul attacks or like the Taki soul attacks. I don't think Talim's soul attack makes any sense for the character. It's almost like they just honed in on this wind bullshit and we're like, we're gonna give her a tornado. So I don't know. I think that's my thought on Talim. In terms of how she actually plays, though, I think her matchup chart sucks. Like, Talim has so many exploitable weaknesses by so many characters that so many matchups are so bad for her, and it's ridiculous. She has no neutral. Like, what is neutral? Talim neutral? Oh, you mean wind? Like, the character has zero neutral. Um, if you lose to a Talim, you got outplayed. Like, if you lose to a Talim, they just bodied you with good mix-ups, good reads, and so on. Her reversal edge game keeps her relevant, and I think that does make her somewhat competitive. And the reason why it's so strong is because it kind of allows her to retake her turn in some cases. Because if you go for a reversal edge bait or a guess, and you go for like a break attack, or if you have a lethal hit associated with reversal edge, she can hold it just long enough and then cancel it, and then you're going to whiff and get booted. So you don't really want to challenge it, but you also don't really want to take it, but then you also don't really want to play around it. Granted, she is eating away her own guard gauge, but it's a way for her to take her turn back, and it is the only thing keeping the character relevant right now. That and 6BK. So 6BK, if you don't know, is a new move that she got, or new extension rather, that she got in season 2. It's pretty powerful, and it's the only thing she has that she can just kind of spam. Um, and for a character like Talim, I do think it's actually very important to have a move that you can spam. For example, um, uh, like Xianghua can use 2-2B, right? A very good spammable move in close range proximity. Or Cassandra, she is 6B, right? Amy can use her 6B or 3A, right? Very good attacks that are somewhat spammable. Talim's only spammable move is 6BK. The problem with 6BK is it leaves her backturned. Now, when she's backturned, that means she doesn't have access to traditional attacks unless they're 8-way run attacks or backturn attacks. So her using 6BK already tells you to some degree what she's going to do if she's going to do anything that isn't just blocking. And so there is counterplay to the situation that she puts herself into, and it's very unfortunate for her. I think this character is very delicate, though. I think that if they overtuned it, it could be very oppressive, but I think right now she does need a bit of love. Again, I don't really have good suggestions or feedback on how. Maybe make Wind Fury more useful, because right now that stance is garbage. And past that, I don't really have much feedback or criticism to give. Tira. So Tira is a character that I was in the belief that people were sleeping on Tira, but honestly, like, I have a bit of a pocket Tira. I played against some Tiras for a while. I looked at the frames. I really dug deep, and you know what? No, I was right, and most people are right. I don't think this character is as good as some players think she is. Yes, yes, her backstep is really oppressive and annoying. Yes, her neutral game plan is fucking irritating. Let me just taunt the entire game. When you try to run at me and jolly, I'm just gonna 6B your ass. But that's not enough. Like, if you think about it, that's a gimmick, right? You're gimmicking your way to Coda, and while they gave her more consistency for her swaps, it has inadvertently hit the character in other ways. Now, do I think it's overall a nerf? No, I don't. But I do think that it can make for some challenging situations. Jolly's frame data is hot garbage, and Jolly literally only has like 3 buttons worth using, and 6B is one of them. But if a Tira is committing to the strings, you can just step the BB and block the K, and the K is -8. Or there's actually a bit of a mini OS where you can do 2G, 8G, and you will micro duck the K in time and sidestep the B immediately. It works with most characters. I was trying it, I've labbed it, and so you're welcome. But that's the thing. So you can 2G, 8G, 2G, 8G, 2G, 8G if you're worried about the extensions. Granted, you are still opening yourself up to her retaking her turn just from raw 6B, but you can't really go wrong with the tech as you'll be blocking nonetheless. So 6B, realistically, is not that oppressive if you just handle it well with proper defense. Or again, 2G8G, 2G8G. Or you can just block the 6BK and sidestep the 6BB because the frames on 6BK do not allow her to retake her turn. If you block 6BK, I can already tell you right now what she's going to do. She's either going to go for a headbutt or she's going to go for B plus K ring auto GI. And so if you know that and you are aware of that, it's not enough. It's not enough. Like, Jolly does not have enough to carry the character. Now, with that said, I actually prefer to play Jolly when I'm playing Tira. I think Jolly is more fun, it's more my style, but it's not enough to carry the character. And Gloomy, or rather, pardon me, Gloomy isn't enough to carry the character because Jolly holds it back so far. Gloomy, on the other hand, is rather linear in its design. Its horizontals are kind of whatever outside of 3A. That's the one thing Tira has going for her is, like Sophitia, they have godlike 14 frame punishes. With Tira, it's 3A. With Sophie, it's of course her stab. And so there's that. But other than that, it's whatever. It's when she gets in Dakota, that's when you have to worry a little bit. And that's the key here, a little bit. Because let's look at Coda, and then let's look at moves like Man Mode, or Roses, or um, uh, yeah, let's compare it to Man Mode and Roses. So if you compare it to Man Mode, who has to go through all his stances to get there, or Coda, who has to swap 7 times to get there, Man Mode is kind of a more consistent version and kind of complements his game plan a little more. This is Maxi I'm talking about, by the way, and 7 stars. Whereas Coda, all Coda gets that's threatening, really, like truly, is an extension on 3B, so you don't really want to punish it, but Azwel already has that, right? Or an extension on 6B, so you don't want to punish it. Well, just step it, like whatever. But all Coda gets is the damn command grab, the unbreakable throw. That is the, like, if Coda, all right, here's my thoughts on Tira, okay? If Coda didn't have the command throw, this character would be down here. Okay? Like, that move alone keeps this character relevant, and the bits and pieces of her kit that are okay keep her somewhat relevant. Her neutral isn't bad. Her offense is shit. Her jolly frames are super, super punishable, and her gloomy playstyle, it's a little telegraphed with the exception of 3A. 3A is kind of the problem. Now, granted, Gloomy kind of got an indirect buff. Not indirect. It's actually direct. In that they gave her Jolly while Rising K to Gloomy. That's super good. Like, Gloomy having the Jolly while Rising K was super strong. But personally, if Gloomy is the better form of Tira, you're not gaining any meter. And in general, her lethal hits are just very difficult to access. So she doesn't really have access to super good damage outside of Gloomy, but then if you're in Gloomy, you don't have good meter access. So, like, it's this perpetual cycle, right? Her soul charge is kind of whatever, because we talked about Coda. Her CE is okay. Either swaps her to Gloomy or does more damage. Her soul attack is actually pretty good. It's actually a very, it's actually very good. But again, not enough. Like, Tira just doesn't have enough to be on a higher level. Like, you'd be better off playing a more consistent, reliable character like Groh or Kilik rather than playing the inconsistencies or dealing with the inconsistencies and the weaknesses of someone like Tira. Now, again, we haven't ordered this tier list yet. We're going to do that at the very end. And it'll probably be a little more clear after that. So last up for B tier, we have Hilde. Hilde is a character that I think is kind of like Xianghua in that there's a lot of string extensions. But if you know what they are and you know what you're looking for, you can deal with it just fine. And if you've got a good auto GI or parry or even just regular GI, you can deal with her strings very well. You take out the strings of Hilde, and she just has really good buttons. But the problem with those buttons is they only have certain effective ranges. Like, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Hilde has tools, but they're all. She doesn't have universal tools. She doesn't have buttons that you can just press. You can't just rely on a button with Hilde, other than like maybe charge A release, right? Charge A5 or charge 5A, I guess is the correct terminology. C5A. Like C5A, sure, yeah, you can kind of spam that all day. Or her horizontal mid kick, I believe it's 4K. No, 4K. I think it's 4K. You can kind of spam that too, but that's it. That's it. And like her charge attacks and her combo damage is solid. Her Oki is super good. Her Oki is hella good. Like she has so many tech traps and like lots of Oki situations. And so like if she hits a combo on you, damn, you're getting throttled. The problem with Hilda's combos though is it's super hard to start them. Think Cervantes, right? Cervantes, like I said earlier in the video, has a lot of ways of accessing big damage. The problem is how punishable the means of getting said damage are. In the case of Hilde, it's kind of the same thing, except not only are they punishable, but they're slow. So if she does her while rising crouching, or no, I guess full crouch charge B or while rising charge B, I don't know how you say it, or how you'd say it. Yeah, she can get a ton of damage, but like, why are you getting hit by that? And it's quite punishable too. So there's that, or like her 2-2B plus K, very slow, right? Very slow. Her 3B, I believe, is I-20, and it has a sour spot, so you're not even gonna get a full combo. Yeah, overall, like you just really shouldn't be getting hit by Hilda's launchers. Realistically, she has decent buttons. But again, like that's not special, right? That's kind of the main thing. Like yes, she has 6B plus K. Yeah, she has horror bids. They're stubby though. Yeah, she has decent ranged pokes, but like so do so many characters above her, right? That's the thing. Like you look at Hilde, is like, why are you playing Hilde when you could play someone like Ivy or Mina or um like even Raph, right? Like Hilde, I think she remember how I said starting this B tier that it's just characters that are outclassed. It's characters like Hilde, Kilik, Groh. They're kind of just outclassed. It's not that they're weak. Like Hilde is not bad. That's the thing. Like Hilde is not a bad character. It's just there are so many other characters that do their job better, and that's why I have Hilde in B tier. She's not at the bottom of B tier though, for the record. So we're gonna fix that. Um, but she's a solid character. She's tricky to play. Her Oki game is godlike, but there are so many really strong Okis in this game. Um, and her matchup chart is very weird. It's very, very weird because she doesn't have, ironically, with a sword and spear, you'd think that mid range would be her strong range. Well, it's not. It's actually her weakest. So it can be quite frustrating to play some matchups with this character. Now, I'll admit, this is probably the one character on the list that I'm willing to move up or down, depending on what I learn as I go and what people talk to me about, because this is still the one character we're all learning, and there's not that many Hilde players out there, so time will tell. She could move up on the list. I'm totally willing to do that, but for now, I'm happy with her in B tier. So, Voldo and Astaroth are in the B- tier for completely different reasons. The B- tier represents the two characters who are either really polarizing and inconsistent, or in the case of Voldo, doesn't have a good matchup. So let's break it down a bit. Voldo. When you look at Voldo and you're playing against Voldo, especially online, you might think, wow, this character has decent buttons. And you'd be right. He has some decent buttons. He has a safe launcher. He has decent horror mids. He's a little slow when he's front facing, but when he's blind stance, he's pretty quick. Um, and overall, he's got some buttons to work with, right, in neutral. But here's the problem. Um, a lot of them are punishable, or they are just outclassed by better versions of the same buttons on other characters. And Voldo doesn't really have any outstanding strength. If you look at his Oki game, that was his gimmick. Like, the strength of Hilde's Oki was in Voldo, except less thought had to go into it. And now that that's kind of been taken away in Season 2, he lacks an identity, much like Kilik, except Kilik, you can just kind of run with it and still play good caliber. Whereas Voldo, he's just outclassed in every way, and that's why he's here on the list. If you look on paper at Voldo's kit, it's not actually that bad. But then you look at everyone else, and it's like, oh shit, I'm outclassed. What the hell? Like, the one thing that I think keeps Voldo somewhat relevant is, again, he has some decent buttons, but it's his CE. His CE is pretty good. But I think his soul attack is kind of whatever, and his soul charge state itself is kind of... I think his soul charge is a gimmick. Maybe that's a hot take, but every single time of all those soul charges, I'm just like, whatever. You're literally going to land fish, and I'm literally just going to backstep, sidestep the entire thing. Bye. Like, I think his soul charge is fucking stupid. But his CEs are pretty good. But the biggest thing holding Voldo back is he probably has less than 5 good matchups. Everything else is either like a 4-6 or worse. And so that's why he's down here. I think that if every character wasn't so bolstered, Voldo would be fine, right? But it's because of how strong every other character is that makes Voldo seem awful. And you'd be right. Like, he does not compare in strength levels to every other character. That's why he's in his own tier with Astaroth. Now, moving on to Astaroth. The reason why Astaroth here is not his strengths or weaknesses in terms of on paper. Like, think about it. A character with multiple command throws for multiple reasons, and they do chip damage on break, and that leaves him +8 on break, and he can kill you in 3 hits, and he has an I-12, whereas Nightmare doesn't. Like, and his soul charge is something you have to respect. His soul attack is a fucking meme. So, like, that's not even in the conversation. But then his CE can be a fantastic just win button if you're right. So what's the problem? Well, at the beginning of this video, I talked about tournament and competitive viability, and that's where Astaroth's weaknesses come into play. So the reason why Astaroth is so low, or is the lowest on this list, is because of the fact that either you will win your first 2 in 60 seconds, and I mean 60 seconds for the entire set, or you're going to lose in 60 seconds and 60 seconds for the whole set. Like, Astaroth is 100% going to win and die by the read. Like, there is no consistency to this character. If you're breaking every throw he does, he's literally not doing any damage. Like, I've said this forever. I even said this back in Season 1. Like, I have always said this about this character. While he has buttons like 5BA and 22B, which are very annoying, or Poseidon's Tide, which is 214A, they're annoying. But, like, you can block them all day long. It doesn't matter. He doesn't gain anything from those buttons. And online, I swear to God, online 6A plus B, which I believe is the input for the, like, he holds his axe with his left hand and just, like, slaps with a horror mid. That move is so online, don't at me. Like, I only get hit by that because of online. But anyway, like, in theory, Astaroth will do no damage to you outside of throw chip, or maybe some guard damage. But that goes both ways, right? He also struggles to deal with tech crouching, and so you can challenge him with a ton of 2A, and if you 2A and he calls it out, his only options are to either crouch throw, which isn't even going to beat your 2A, by the way, or go for the armor command throw. If he goes for the armor command throw, well, guess what? Now he has to guess standing or crouching anyway. So it's not even that hard to constantly stop Astaroth from hitting buttons. And like other than those couple buttons I mentioned, and the bull rush I forgot to mention though, and the bull rushes, like none of those are lows, none of those are that scary. You can take all of those, you can block all of those, and be fine. He just cannot compete because of the fact that, or he almost can't compete. Correction, he almost can't compete because of how either all in or all out this character is. If you aren't getting your throws, you're losing the set. And that's the issue with Astaroth. He doesn't have any button that he can just be like, yeah, this is a good button. Yeah, I'm gonna just crutch on this for a bit. No problem. Yeah, I'm just gonna open you up. Oh wait, I don't have any lows, therefore I have to throw. Oh wait, all my damage is in my throws. Oh wait, my lethal hits literally revolve around throws. Okay, sick. Alright, awesome. So yeah, I think Astaroth is just awful. And that pretty much does it for my tier list. But let's reorder it first. We'll go from there. So let's see, within the tiers themselves, I think that, and then um, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. And then 2B, Nightmare, Yoshi, Xianghua. Yeah, here, and then Kilik, Groh. Hilde, Maxi, Taki, Talim, Tira, Taki, Talim. No. Talim, Tira, Taki. No. Tira, Talim. Yeah. Yeah. There. And then Talim, Taki, Voldo, Asta. Yeah, okay. So there. That's my tier list. And for the video aspect of this, thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good day.